Are there things that people may find surprising in the way that alcohol affects our brain and our body that is not common knowledge?
Alcohol has a very significant impact on our nutritional levels. It will deplete us in vitamin D, our B vitamins, our vitamin C, our magnesium, our zinc. Really across the board, we see a lot of nutrient deficiencies. And all of this is just to say that alcohol is a toxin, for lack of a better word. And the
Yes.
reason that we feel drunk when we drink it is because it's having an influence on our nervous system. And that feeling that we feel, that silliness, that inability to walk straight, is really the effect of our nervous system being poisoned. And I don't say that to scare, but really to say, when you think about it that way, it changes your perspective on it. For sure.
Welcome to the FWD Think Tank podcast, a place of hope, inspiration, and education around holistic health and healing. I'm your host, Jamie Mazza, a holistic health coach, mental health advocate, and dancer. Join me as I share out-of-the-box conversations with integrative doctors, healers, and exceptional forward-thinking individuals thriving on the other side of their health challenges, as well as stories from my own personal healing journey. Thank you for tuning in. I'm so happy you're here.
Welcome back to the FWD Think Tank. This week, I am joined by Dr. Brooke Scheller. We are having a conversation about sobriety, the impact that alcohol can have on your health, your brain, your gut, your hormones, and what it could look like if you're looking to make a journey into sobriety. Maybe you're sober curious. This episode is for you. Brooke is somebody who I met when she was living here in New York. We took classes virtually. We both loved Jane Dew. Shout out to Jane Dew. She has since moved to California and done a lot of incredible work and has recently celebrated 4 years of sobriety. Dr. Brooke Scheller is a doctor of clinical nutrition. She's a certified nutrition specialist, international author, and the founder of Scheller Collective. She is also a certified functional psychiatry provider, CFPP, and works with clients on using nutrition and health practices to improve mental health. In 2021, Dr. Brooke created the functional sobriety approach, focused on nutrition and supplementation to support an alcohol-free lifestyle. In December of 2023, Dr. Brooke released her debut title, How to Eat to Change How You Drink, which has been published in the US, UK, Australia, and Spain. As a nutrition expert passionate in food for supporting mental health, mood, and addiction, Dr. Brooke works with individuals and groups to help support better brain, gut health, hormones, metabolism, and more. Her online courses have been celebrated by members around the globe. Now, Brooke is incredibly intelligent. I just appreciate her time to come on the podcast and talk about a topic that is so close to a lot of people's hearts. Whether you know somebody or you yourself are looking to change your relationship with alcohol, this is a really great place to start. Dr. Brooke is not only incredibly knowledgeable on this topic after having her own lived experience, choosing to move away from using alcohol. And she discusses her personal experience and her journey with alcohol, what life was like before, what her wake up aha moment was during the pandemic, and why she chose to move away from using alcohol. But she also goes into a lot of great detail after realizing there was a gap in the field of nutrition, not really teaching clinicians about the impact of how alcohol can disrupt and affect things like our mood, our brain, our gut microbiome, our hormones, blood sugar. So we get into this level of detail in our conversation. It is honestly so fascinating. The other thing about Brooke is that she's incredibly compassionate and she wants to meet people where they're at. She understands that this can be an incredibly emotional and vulnerable journey to be going on if you are looking to make such a drastic change in your lifestyle. And she certainly comes to this conversation with that lens. She is nurturing, she's supportive. Like I mentioned, she's written a book on the topic. She guides courses and community and really helps people make changes to their life and their health that can improve the outcome of rebounding from something like substance abuse with alcohol. That is something she talks about in great deal with her book, How to Eat to Rebound from some of the nutrients that alcohol can deplete you from. And this conversation was really eye-opening for me. It is coming up on the holiday season, so we are recording this prior to the holidays, but it is often a time that goes along with a lot of stress, overwhelm, and a lot on our plate, including holiday gatherings, social holiday parties, things where alcohol is often involved. If you're looking to make that shift, maybe you're thinking about starting with a dry January, or you're looking to just challenge yourself or better your health or cut back in some way, this is such an empowering conversation. I want to thank Brooke for being a part of the podcast. It was truly so nice to reconnect with you. I enjoyed every minute of everything that you had to say. I feel like we easily could have dove in deep into some of these conversations in a lot more detail with a lot more time. But I think it's a really good place to start. If you're looking to get more insight into her world or what it looks like as you make the transition away from alcohol and what you can do to support yourself nutritionally, definitely check her book out or gift it to somebody this holiday season. The holidays are right around the corner. I will include every way to get in touch with Brooke, what she's up to in her work. I love, as she shares, that she is also starting to focus more on the mental health side of things, something that is so incredibly important to me in every aspect of somebody's life, no matter what the challenge is. It is so important to support our mental health in the process. And making sobriety part of your lifestyle is certainly something that should be considered when you're looking at somebody's mental health and how fragile that may be. So thank you again, Brooke, for doing this with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please share this with somebody who may need to hear it. Send it to a friend, a colleague, a coworker, somebody who you may want to support you in this journey. Do this as a way of supporting a loved one who's looking to make those changes in their life. And we'd love to hear what you think from the episode too. So please leave a comment. Let us know what you learned. Thank you again, Brooke, and welcome Dr. Brooke Scheller to the Forward Think Tank. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Forward Think Tank. This week, I am joined by Dr. Brooke Scheller. Brooke is a doctor of clinical nutrition, a certified nutrition specialist, an international author, and the founder of Scheller Collective. Dr. Brooke, I am so happy to have you here. Welcome to the podcast. It is so great to see you. It is so great to connect with you. I can't wait to dive into all things that you are the expert in. Functional nutrition. We're going to talk about sobriety, about how alcohol affects our health, a lot of things that are top of mind for people, especially leading into the holiday season, craziness and, period of time where it can be quite stressful. I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jamie. It's so good seeing you and catching up with you. And thank you for being mindful of bringing this topic on the podcast because it is so, so important. And we're recording this before the holidays. So a lot of people try to compartmentalize this topic till the new year and touch on it for dry January and New Year's resolutions. But really what I hope we can discuss and your listeners can take away today is a new kind of perspective on alcohol and how it influences health, and feel a little inspired to try a new way. If you're a drinker or if you're looking to improve your health, this can be a great way to get started. So it's good to see you and see you doing well. And I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for saying all that. I think there are people who are certainly sober curious is a word that's been thrown around a lot the last 5 or so years. People, I'm even seeing it here in Jersey City. Certain people who maybe used to frequent the bars are now turning to mocktails or turning to other ways to soothe their nervous system. So I'm so excited to dive into this topic with you. I like to always start at the beginning, and maybe for people who aren't super familiar with you and your story, can you tell us a bit about how you became interested in the connection between nutrition, sobriety, mental health, and how that has then shown up in your work?
Yeah, well, I always love telling my story because I am a classic grade A millennial that went through the era of drinking at bonfires in the middle of the woods and telling your parents you were sleeping at another friend's house, but you're really sleeping at a party or sleeping who knows where. And alcohol really being a part of everything. I also always share, since we're both East Coast gals, I'm from the Jersey Shore. And I used to, for the longest time, tell people I'm from the Jersey Shore, but not the one on TV. And then recently I realized, oh, actually, it was the one on TV. We were drinking and partying just as hard as those people. And it's really interesting because I look at how alcohol was portrayed to us as we were teenagers, young adults, in shows like Jersey Shore and the MTV shows, The Real World, and how alcohol was so glamorized. And I think so many of us grew up in that era where it was the cool thing. And I know I can say for myself, I burnt out on alcohol big time. And I am a doctor of nutrition. I was going through all of my training while I was also balancing on the other end an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And when I decided to get sober in June of 2021, it really wasn't until I reflected back on that and my experience as a doctor of nutrition and how those two pieces come together to say, how can I bring more of this information to people so that we can make informed decisions for our health. I also know that so many of us experience health challenges. We experience mental health struggles, and all of
Yes.
those things can be connected back to alcohol.
Yes. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, I was raised in the same millennial era where I'm just laughing as you're saying, like you're going out and getting drunk in the field well before we were even legal to drink, right? We didn't know what we were doing and we had no idea how it was interacting with our bodies. So much can be said for so many other things that our age group has experienced and lived through. But the fact that you took that upon yourself to, and a lot of people that I bring on the podcast, the work that they do is led by their life experience. So you were, obviously working to get your doctorate in clinical nutrition, but then had this experience where you had made this decision. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about specifically what led you to the decision, if you don't mind sharing, to decide to become sober. Where did that,
Well,
what was going on in your life at the time?
I'm always open to sharing about this, so I thank you for asking, because I think it's important to know that a lot of people who work in different arenas have that life experience. For me, I never thought I would work in helping other people quit drinking or, cut back on substances. And I look at it as like the universal alignment. At that point, when I finally got
Absolutely.
sober, everything clicked into place. It all really
Mhm.
started to make sense. And I
Yeah.
share that too because I thought that quitting alcohol was going to end my life as I knew it. And the reality is, it was the beginning of this new, beautiful thing of me feeling like I finally found that path forward.
Yeah.
And I always share the experience too that in my first year after quitting drinking, I had achieved 3 goals that I had been carrying over on my New Year's resolutions for years and years. I ran a half
Wow.
marathon, I started a business, and I got a book
Amazing.
deal all within a year of
Amazing.
sobriety. And I share that because it's a testament of what we can do when we take away this thing that is clouding our minds. Now, I am
Mhm.
someone who was drinking in a field as a teenager and then glamorizing that, living in New York City and kind of living this high powered lifestyle, if you will. I always liked to drink. It was really the only way I knew how to socialize and cope, which is
Mm.
relevant for so many people.
Yes.
And it really was, for me, the pandemic kind of shifted things for me. I always say that I was keeping my nose just enough above water before the pandemic that I could feel like I had it together, seem like I had it together, pay my bills, pay my rent, get to work. But during the pandemic, when we're all working from home, working out from home, whatever we're doing from home, all of it, it became easier to just drink whenever. And it became this thing that a lot of people started to do. And I always say that it's almost like my alcohol use, it was like a pot simmering on the back of the stove. The water was boiling, but it was under control. And the pandemic really cranked that up. And now the pot is boiling over. So it started really spilling into my other aspects of my life. My relationships were suffering. My mental health was really suffering. And when I got to the point of quitting in June of 2021, I was really at a breaking point. I say that differently from rock bottom. I didn't necessarily have what you would quantify as or qualify as being a quote unquote alcoholic. I didn't have a DUI while I lived in New York City. I didn't have a car. I hadn't lost my job. I hadn't lost a family, but at the same time, I was really demoralized. I was really broken down physically and mentally from this substance. I started by getting into 12-step programs and really trying to build community. And I was about 3 months sober when I had the realization that I needed to write a book on this. And I had been looking around at how little discussion there was around the ways that alcohol influences our gut microbiome and our hormones and our immune system and our nutrients. I really wanted to bring that to the forefront. So it's really been a great way for me to not only hold myself accountable in sobriety, but also be able to help others. And that's what's really important to me.
Yes. And thank you, because when I have people share their stories, I want to be very mindful of people not reliving their trauma. The picture that you just painted for all of us, it is so relatable, especially the pandemic rocked us all, knocked us flat. Things that we used to enjoy, we were no longer doing. I believe everybody worldwide, we were struggling in some way, and we all had different ways of coping with that. So for you to have that aha moment to say, this isn't serving me, it's spilling, as you said, it was a slow simmering pot, and then it started to boil over, and now it's spilling into all these different aspects of my life. Like, hey, Brooke, you need to make a change. I really commend you for that. And then also seeing the missing link. And I'm curious, because you studied, clinical nutrition, you got your doctorate. Was that something that you had ever learned about, like in depth, the way that alcohol really affects our system? Or did you have to go digging for that information as you were going through your sobriety journey? Because I have definitely gathered bits and pieces of it from like hormone courses that I've taken, and I choose not to drink just because I feel better. It affects me very differently than it does other people. My sleep was always disrupted. Like, it really does a number on me. I'm curious if that was education that you had stored in the back of your brain saying, oh, now we're realizing how this is actually true, or was that information that you had to go find for yourself?
So that's a great question. And it's ironic because before this call, I was actually on a call with a hormone company who makes products for menopause, perimenopause. And she was sharing about how doctors don't get any menopause education in their medical training. Doctors also don't get much nutrition training. As doctors of nutrition, we really didn't get much training on alcohol either. I think that's a big missing link across the board too, that there's really not a lot of education there. It's one of these topics taboo. Unless someone has a problem, you send them to AA. You don't really touch it with a 10-foot pole, and then you hope for the best. And with nutrition, we learned about alcohol as a substance and how it's metabolized in the body, but we didn't necessarily learn about all the ways that it influences as the central piece. So, for example, we might have learned that alcohol breaks down the lining of the gut barrier, but so does medication, so does stress, so does all these other things. Whereas when I got sober, I kind of reframed it for myself as, how do I look at alcohol as the central piece of some of this? Because for people like me who were drinking daily or almost daily, that's going to be very different in the way that it influences us over someone who just drinks here and there. And so that's going to play a really big role on biology. It's going to really influence our nutrient levels. It might play a bigger role in balancing the gut microbiome and all of these other pieces. It became, for me, we need to think about this topic differently for people who are drinkers. And for the most part, most people aren't even really asked about their drinking, or they're told, oh, as long as you drink socially, it's okay. For me, it's become more about how do we educate people so that they know they have informed consent of what they're doing when they're taking this substance.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. To go a little bit deeper, are there things that some people may find surprising in the way that alcohol affects our brain and our body that is not common knowledge? And I know you're going to have a lot of information on this, so feel free to go share as much as you feel is relevant to the conversation. I'm sure you've got some very surprising stats out there.
Well, I want to preface it by saying, like, this topic can feel really overwhelming if you're a drinker. So if you're listening and you do drink alcohol, I want you to know that where I present a lot of this information from is empowering you to have the information, and not necessarily saying you have to be sober, you have to quit drinking entirely, all of these things. That was my experience, and that is what was worked best for me. But I think it's important to note that I'd rather you listen to it and get some information rather than turning us off right now because, you're not ready to think about it quite yet, which is fair too.
Thank you for
I
saying that because
Yeah,
I don't
it's
want to
really
turn anyone
important.
off to this conversation. The conversations that I have on this platform are always meant to offer insights. And if you were curious about the title and the description on this episode, know that even the smallest of takeaways, even just listening and not judging yourself while doing so, is opening up your mind to a different way of potentially operating. So
And
thank you
that's why I
for
like to
saying
share
that.
my story and say that I was a daily drinker in the end. I had no clue what life would look like without alcohol. It was terrifying, but it's really
Mm,
just listening to these conversations is really good baby steps to toe your way into it. And I always
yes.
believe that if you're listening, you're here for a reason and that there's something here that's meant for you too. So, but
Yes.
to your question, Jamie, I'm constantly surprised, but not surprised by all of the research that is out there on alcohol, but is not presented, I think, regularly. The last 5 years or so, too, have been quite starkly different than the time before that in terms of what we see in the alcohol literature.
Mm,
2022 tended to be a really big year for alcohol research that flipped a lot of the
mm,
previous notions on their heads. So we see now that there is no cardiovascular benefit, even in that one glass of wine per day, that
mm,
really any amount of alcohol can increase cardiovascular disease risk, and that there were some flaws to the early studies on this topic.
mm.
And that is shocking for a lot of people to hear because we've heard that 1 or 2 glasses a day is good for us, potentially has
Yes.
positive benefit. We also see that there's now studies that show, again, another one from 2022 that looked at gray and white matter volume in the brain and the
Mm.
decrease of that gray and white matter volume with even just that one drink per day. So we're seeing
Wow.
changes to the brain even at that low amount.
Mm.
Now, I could go on and on this topic, but I think everything from the way that alcohol influences the microbiome, if you're someone who's taking a probiotic and later on having some wine, those two things are potentially canceling each other out. And that
Yep.
probiotic doesn't have the ability to have an effect if you're taking
Mm.
in alcohol, which is a toxin that kills bacteria, including that good bacteria. So we see with moderate to heavy drinkers, changes to bacterial diversity, changes in the lining of the intestinal wall. We see changes to digestion, digestive enzymes. So actually work with a lot of people who end up having GI issues after long-term alcohol use,
Mm.
which can look like reflux or IBS. Hormones tend to be a big topic that interests people too. There is a huge influence that alcohol has on our regulation of sex hormones, our stress hormones, our hunger and satiety hormones, really hormones across the board. One really interesting study that shocked me was, and also not shocking, but good to see the research, that women who were experiencing infertility and drinking alcohol, that there is a correlation there as well. So if you've been
Wow.
struggling with fertility, that's another thing that you want to keep in mind. We usually hear you don't have to stop drinking till you're pregnant, but we don't often get told that prior to conception
Mm.
also has an influence as well.
Yeah.
And one more area I'll just touch on is nutrients and nutrition. And alcohol has a very significant impact on our nutritional levels. It will deplete us in vitamin D, our B vitamins, vitamin C, our magnesium, our zinc. Really across the board, we see a lot of nutrient deficiencies. And all of this is just to say that alcohol is a toxin, for lack of a better word. And the
Yes.
reason that we feel drunk when we drink it is because it's having an influence on our nervous system. And that feeling that we feel, that silliness, that inability to walk straight, is really the effect of our nervous system being poisoned. I don't say
Wow.
that to scare, but really to
Yeah.
say, when you think about it that way, it changes your perspective on it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sitting here having heard some of the things you're saying, and it makes sense as you're explaining it. thinking about something like the gut microbiome and even it just changing the diversity of bacteria in your gut, I feel like the gut and the hormone piece have become a lot more prevalent in mainstream conversations lately. And, so people are beginning to gain a little bit of awareness. But if you're not thinking about the alcohol consumption and you're still struggling with some of these issues, it is a missing piece that's getting dusted under the rug. That actually jumps right into a question I was going to ask about the nutritional depletion that people will experience when they consume alcohol on the regular. I'm curious, in the work that you do, and you've also written a book, How to Change the Way You Eat to Change the Way You Drink. Kudos to you, girl, for that accomplishment. It's amazing. I would love for you to talk a little bit for people who are listening and thinking, okay, maybe I do want to make some changes for myself. And, they're willing to cut back on the drinking or maybe cut it out. Are there things you recommend typically from a nutritional perspective to start incorporating to help your body rebound from that nutritional depletion?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really the premise of my book. And the reason why is because I'm a nerdy science person that I always need to have the answer. I always need to know the why. I need to
Yeah.
know why my body became so dependent on alcohol and why some people can drink and other people can take it or leave it, and why some people feel good with it. Some people feel bad with it. I always want to know the biology and like the systems that are behind the curtain, if you will. One of the things that for me became really clear when I quit drinking and had the clarity of mind to think through this all was alcohol changes our physiology. When we drink alcohol, it is not an inert substance. Nothing that we take in is an inert substance, right? So even when we drink water, water is hydrating our cells. It's providing us with electrolytes that we need in order to function. Now, it would be silly of us to think that we could drink this substance and not have effects from it. So the way my brain works is I was thinking, well, if alcohol changes our physiology, how do we reverse that change to our physiology? And how do we repair those systems that may have been damaged from alcohol in the long term? And one of the things that has never been an argument in the research around alcohol is the influence it has on nutrients, because alcohol is going to increase our need for nutrients. It increases oxidative stress, cellular damage. So we need more antioxidant nutrients to come in and clean up that damage. We also know that the metabolism, the breakdown of alcohol, is a very energy intensive process. So requires a lot of our energy storage to be diverted over to the alcohol metabolism. We also know that alcohol can influence digestion and can influence how we absorb nutrients. Not to mention that I can say in my own experience that in the end, in my heavy drinking times, I was not prioritizing healthy meals 100% of the time. I know a lot of people can relate to choosing whatever's around if it's late night after drinking. And so it's really, for me, about looking at how do we reverse some of this damage if we've been long-term drinkers. So yes, repleting nutrients is a big part of that. And that could be with just getting more nutrients into your diet in general. It could be with supplementation, which I find to be really effective when used appropriately. And it might also even be in the realm of getting onto a protocol like I talk about in my book, where you are strategically bringing in some of these foods that are more healing. One of the things that I also talk a lot about is blood sugar management, because oftentimes when we feel a craving to drink, it may be a craving of low blood sugar or an experience of low blood sugar. When do we often crave alcohol? In that 5 or 6 o'clock time frame. And my first question to people who crave at that time is, when was the last time you ate? Because if it was more than a few hours ago, it's very likely that your body is responding to you having low blood sugar. Alcohol contains sugar, carbohydrates, is going to give you that quick pick-me-up. But over the long term, alcohol has a really sabotaging effect on blood sugar. So we use more protein, structuring meal times more consistently, even just having an afternoon snack. These are some of the things that we can do really strategically with food to help you overcome those cravings and support less alcohol or no alcohol if that's your goal.
Yeah, thank you. It's so important for people to hear, especially, I'm over here. I've been coaching people for many years now, and there's so many people, especially in this area, and you used to live in New York, so you get it, you lived it. Everybody is just so churn and burn, and we're just going to keep going. We forget to eat. I know you're asking like if I'm still working with Busy Bee, and yes, we just got done with a detox last week, and the food's all prepared for you. I'm encouraging people to set reminders to eat. It's amazing to me the amount of people who can just plow through the workday and just forget. So I think that's a really great point to bring up about blood sugar balance. Blood sugar imbalance is at the root of so many issues with our health and hormones and all the things. So I think the simple tips that you've laid out, and I do encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're finding this conversation interesting, or maybe you're thinking of a loved one that could relate to this conversation, please share the episode, but also please check out Dr. Brooke's book. The holiday gifting season is right around the corner, so no better time to check that out and gift that to a loved one. But yeah,
It's
thank
so
you for
important to Jamie.
laying
I
that
would
out.
just jump in and say everybody's looking for the next trend and like cutting edge thing. For the most part, a lot of it is getting back to basics in this arena. If you're thinking about cutting back or quitting drinking, the last thing that you need is something really overwhelming to add on top of that. And,
Yeah.
for me, it's more about getting these basics in order. It's more about how do we stress your body less? So, how do we get you prepared food as one example
Mm-hmm.
so that it's not an additional stressor? Because
Yeah.
if you've got food in the fridge ready to go, it's going to be much easier for you to have that afternoon snack or your lunch or whatever it might be versus, okay, well, I'm just going to push through, churn and burn. And then the day comes and it's, oh my gosh, I can't resist that drink. Like my nervous system, my body is not okay. And I need something to help me feel okay. It's really
Yeah.
about addressing when we have those cravings or those intense desires for alcohol, asking, well, what do I really need right now? Do I
Yes.
need
Yes.
food? Do I need a nap? Do I have to call my mom and vent?
Do I
What
need
is
a
it that I
hug?
need? Yeah. What is my body actually telling me? Because I can
Mm-hmm.
guarantee alcohol isn't what it's actually telling you.
Right.
That is just a tool that we've used in the past to soothe.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to back it up a little bit to something you said earlier, you had mentioned that when you were drinking regularly, it was something that made you, and I'm not using your exact words, but made you more comfortable in a social setting. So I'm sure that a lot of people can also relate to that as well, especially given the fact that the last 5 years took us out of socialization. And then now we're at a point where we're all back in the world again. There's a little bit of dysregulation in how to socialize. So for people who are thinking about making that change, but that is something that's in the back of their mind, are there tips from that perspective that you would recommend for somebody who's feeling like, well, it's my social crutch?
Yeah, well, I can relate to that big time because all of my friends were drinkers. All of the people
Mm.
around me, my coworkers, everyone was drinkers. And so it can be isolating to think about the idea of taking that away. And then there's a lot of elements that come into our mind, whether that's what will they think? How will I interact? I had someone reach out to me maybe a year or two after I quit drinking, and I'm very public about my quitting drinking journey and all of that on social media. And he asked me a question and said, so do you just go to a bar and not drink? And
Mm.
I said, no. I realized that there's like a whole world outside of bars that I didn't know existed personally. When you step outside of that, you look at how isolating it really is to just be in this place and drinking and kind of small existence, whereas
Yes.
there's so much else to do out here that isn't alcohol. And
Mm.
it really takes a lot of time for our brains to comprehend that when we're used to drinking. But
Yeah.
that might look, I think personally right now it's one of the easiest times to quit or cut back on drinking because there's so much more in the alcohol-free drink space. Most
Yes.
places you go, you can get a mocktail of some kind or a non-alcoholic
Yep.
drink that isn't juice or soda. Also, people are really interested in this topic. So 5 years ago, if you said you weren't drinking, there would be more pressure to drink. Whereas now
Hmm.
it's such a common trend, if you will, to
Yeah.
quit or to take a dry January, for example, that nowadays, if you tell someone, they're usually interested. They're not judging you for it. They're usually saying, well, how are you feeling? Oh, I was thinking
Right.
about trying that. And so you can potentially be a source of inspiration. And
Mm.
I'm in the camp of empowerment. If we go into something and we feel shame about it and we live in that shame, it's going to come off in one way. Versus, hey, I quit drinking. Actually, I feel really good. And people aren't going to argue that, right? It's
Right.
having a bit more conviction. So it's really, again, I'd say like keep listening to these kinds of episodes, keep reaching out to friends who are quitting or cutting back, get some books like
Hmm.
mine, and really just kind of start learning and educating yourself more. And I think that you'll find over time that much of the social protection that alcohol provided for us was really an illusion.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. What a good word. An illusion. Yes. It's taking me back to times even early on in me living in New York after college where like that it was just the way that we socialized as young people. It was such a staple, I want to say, in the weekend, in the after work experience. But I love what you said about the fact that you realized when you made the decision to stop drinking, a whole world exists outside of that scene. So, did you find, and I'm thinking of some people in my own life that made that decision to move away from alcohol, and it wasn't easy. They had a lot of people in their support network that were also drinking. Some people are doing it alone, but sometimes you're also doing it with others. For people who feel like they may need to totally recreate their network, I can imagine that feeling very overwhelming for people. Did you find that in your experience, at least, did you have people who were in support of your decision? Did you feel like you had to, or maybe did as things evolved and you stepped away from that scene, made a new network of friends and people who supported that new lifestyle? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's pulling from a lot of what you're mentioning, Jamie. I had found community. I had joined 12-step group, and of course
Mhm.
there's community within that, which for better or for worse, because it's not the route that everybody thinks is right for them or that feels right for
Right.
them. But
Right.
there are so many other sober communities that now exist online, places that you can get more support from that isn't the traditional path of AA, for example. So
Mhm.
finding community is always going to be helpful because it's going to help you understand how to live that lifestyle without alcohol.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
going to provide you with some kind of built-in support system, which is really great. For
Yeah.
me, I shared pretty openly when I had decided to make the decision to quit drinking with close friends and family members who were very supportive. And I think what I found at that point was I started latching on to the friends that felt safe at that time and away from
Mm.
people that didn't really get it. So, for example, one of my good friends at the time, Rachel, she was also a drinker, not as heavy of a drinker as I was, but when I told her this, she was like, I think it's a great idea. When we go out next time, I'll drink club soda with you. So that's a good friend who's not saying, oh, no, I don't think you need to do that, yada, yada, yada. And here's a
Right.
glass of wine. Hey, I'm going to support you. And
Yeah.
so I think it's leaning into those friendships and think just testing them a little bit. And I say testing them
Hmm.
in a sense of, if you normally go and get wine with a girlfriend once a week, suggest to her to get coffee or breakfast or go for a
Yeah.
walk instead of meeting at the
Right.
bar. So, what I
Right.
mean by testing it is if that person says yes and wants to do those things with you, then that's a good thing. If that person says no, I only want to get the glass of wine, then it's maybe a question of is this someone that I want to continue spending or putting a lot of time and effort into? I think it can feel really overwhelming, which is why having support really early on is going to be helpful. But I do
Completely
think
true.
it really shows you who's a true friend, who's someone who's in it maybe for the long haul versus a friend that's just around for that season of your life.
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm glad to hear that you had friends in your corner that were supportive. And you brought up so many great tips between community groups and things like AA, if that feels like it's the right thing for you, and kind of testing the parameters of your friendships. I think that the last thing any of us in any area of our life want to feel is judged or isolated or alone. And when you're looking to make a change like this, which for some people can be a total reprogramming of life as they knew it, it's something we were talking about before I hit record, that without maybe knowing it, our nervous systems are designed to feel safe. I know that's something you and I were mentioning a little bit before we officially hopped on to the podcast conversation, but finding those friends and finding that support system is going to create that network of safety. And I think the safer we feel and the more we experience that support and that safety, the more confident we're going to get stepping into a social scene or making changes to our daily activity and doing more of that as we take the alcohol away.
And I think it goes even deeper than that, right? Well, what is the feeling that alcohol is giving us? In a lot of ways, it's giving us that feeling of safety. It's an illusion because it's actually probably creating more unsafe situations for us.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there's this comfort, there's this recognizable friend that is in the room when we feel that relief of alcohol coming in. And so getting out of that, you're taking off that armor and you're going to feel prickly. You're going to feel a little like a baby giraffe with those little legs that can't really stand up. So it's about reaching for the friends that can help you stand and are proud of you and think that you're making the right decision. And the ones who aren't as supportive, maybe just putting them at arm's length a little bit and exploring that again later on, but really just following what you need in order to feel safe in this decision and feel like you can at least explore it. And I think that for some people, setting those short timeframes like a dry January and things like that can be good ways to start. It's not the best thing for everyone because sometimes people say, okay, I did good for a month. Now I can go back to my drinking and, no, I'm not an alcoholic, which I've done these things too. But it's really more so about, can I set myself a goal that feels attainable and work toward that? And then at the end, reevaluate what my lifestyle is and how do I want to bring that substance in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, this conversation is so good. I just am so appreciative of you and all of this because I know there's people out there listening to this just relating in a lot of different ways. I hope this conversation is bringing you a little bit of comfort and like I said earlier, opening up the area of opportunity in your brain to see what is possible if you choose to make that decision to move away from alcohol. So we've said it in many different ways, but to say it very directly, a lot of people are drinking to cope with stress quite often. And as we approach the holiday season, or we think about that 5 to 6 o'clock hour, getting home from a stressful work day, it's almost like the subconscious programming. Are there foods or nutrients that actually help the body rebound from stress better and things that you would recommend to people when they're making this transition away from alcohol?
Yes, this is a great question. And I will preface this by saying one of my favorite things that has gone viral of mine on Instagram, which is that alcohol does not help your stress. It actually makes your stress worse. It drives your cortisol levels. It actually worsens your stress. It may feel like it gives us that initial temporary relief. And that is basically a flood of neurotransmitters in our brain, feel good neurotransmitters. And after that, cortisol is elevated. So what we think is a stress reliever is actually creating higher stress levels at baseline. So think about it. When we drink alcohol, it takes away that stress at the time, but usually the next day we kind of feel yucky, right? Even if we've only had a little bit, we feel maybe a little off of our game. And that then kind of snowballs. And a lot of the nerdy scientist in me loved in the beginning going in and saying, well, how do we enable the same systems and pathways that make us feel relaxed from alcohol without using alcohol? And there are a lot of things that can do that. One of the feelings that we get, that feeling of relief we get from alcohol, is from the increase of GABA. GABA is one of our body's relaxing neurotransmitters. It helps us. I always tell people it's like the when you feel your shoulders drop, that's a GABA. That's a GABA feeling.
That's the way. Okay.
Yeah. Well, GABA is a neurotransmitter that requires L-theanine, an amino acid, to be produced. And I sometimes use L-theanine supplementally with clients. When I used to run groups, I would have a lot of people taking L-theanine, especially if they had more of an anxiety-driven alcohol craving, like a I don't know what to do next, and I just want to check out, so I'm going to drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
L-theanine is an amino acid. It's found in proteins. L-theanine is actually quite high in green tea, specifically matcha, because it's a bit more concentrated. So
I
in
love
the afternoon,
matcha.
instead of having a coffee, maybe a
Yeah.
matcha is the
Yep.
better direction to go because it's going to help with boosting that GABA. So that's a
Fabulous.
good kind of tip there. Magnesium is another really important consideration because magnesium is our body's relaxing mineral. It is required for us to have muscle relaxation, to have nervous system relaxation, to sleep. So if you are someone who uses alcohol to help with that relaxation or especially sleep, magnesium is of course depleted when we drink alcohol. As the irony never fails us, right? That we drink, it depletes something that would have helped us, so then we drink to cope with that feeling or that sensation. So I often use a lot of magnesium mineral drinks in the afternoon. One of the recipes in my book is a magnesium where you put magnesium powder with whatever ingredients you so choose. And that is a good way to have your replacement drink and still get some of these benefits. There's also a lot now out there of non-alcoholic beverages that contain things like ashwagandha, which is a stress reliever. Some of them contain L-theanine and can help with that as well. So there's a lot of great options out there that can be really useful.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So helpful. This conversation is just so great. It's full of so many nuggets of wisdom, Brooke. So I appreciate everything you've shared so far.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like we've addressed so many of these questions that I have, but if you could give advice to somebody who is sober curious, but they're nervous to take that first step, what is a piece of like initial advice that you would share with somebody?
Yeah, so I think that it all starts with a seed, right? It's like a seed of an idea. And I talk about in my book the idea that it starts with a whisper. So I remember in my experience before I got sober, there was like this little whisper in the back of my head at some point that said like, maybe I need to quit drinking. And it's a whisper. It's a whisper. Okay, it's getting a little louder. It's getting a little louder. It's like knocking on the door. Okay, and then like there's this realization of like, okay, this needs to change or this needs to happen. But I think what's most interesting to me is all of these things are just like seeds for a plant to grow. The plant doesn't need to grow today. The plant doesn't even need to grow this month or this year. Maybe the plant doesn't grow for 5 years. But by starting to like find some seeds and start to plant them, maybe start watering them a little, I always say like, this is just an opportunity for you to start learning about this topic. So maybe this inspires you to listen to another podcast that I've been on where I talk more about gut health or I talk more about a different topic. Maybe this inspires you to order my book or another book. There's a huge quit lit genre, quit literature of all these books about going alcohol free. Many different options. Quit Like a Woman, This Naked Mind. Really, there's like several at this point. So picking one of those books out and starting to read and trusting your gut as you follow this journey, that you don't have to do anything today. You can decide just to not drink today if that feels right for you. But I think it's really about following the breadcrumbs on this journey and seeing where it takes you, because it's not something that most of us just do overnight. It's not something that all of a sudden you have this aha moment, epiphany, and boom, you make this change. So it's really all just about, okay, that was interesting. Maybe you're going to journal about it tonight. Maybe you're going to talk about it to a friend or your partner. and see where that takes you. I think your job now is to keep following those breadcrumbs and see where they lead. And they might lead to something really beautiful. And that might mean no alcohol or less alcohol.
That's a beautiful piece of advice because I think it takes the feeling of overwhelm that can surround such a big decision. All I was thinking about, of course, I was thinking about like planting seeds and like us making a garden and then the breadcrumbs, but it just micro steps, right? Micro steps in the right direction. And that to me, as somebody who can feel overwhelmed with a lot of decision making, I was like, ooh, like if this was something that I was curious, hearing that made it feel tangible. Hearing that made it feel like,
Yeah.
oh, I can try that. I can do that. So that was
Because
great.
it's a big deal for a lot of us. It's a big deal for
Mhm.
a lot of us. Again, I've gone through this myself, so I can say firsthand that that was a hard decision. The first day that I didn't drink, I didn't think it was going to be the last time I ever drank was the night before.
Mhm.
It really just it was all about following, I don't know, what was put in front of me at that point. And I think alcohol is such a coping mechanism for stress, and the idea of taking it away creates stress, which also then creates this cognitive dissonance of, I know I shouldn't be doing this thing, and yet I'm doing this thing, but I can't stop doing this thing. And
Mhm.
I think what we most need is oftentimes just to like take it easy. You know, there's a reason why in AA they say take it one day at a time, but that's for everything. You know, one day at a time
Yeah.
is to whatever the journey is that you're on. One micro change at a time. If you have a list of 100 things to do, you don't do them all at once. You take one at a time. And so it's really just about opening your mind to exploring what other avenues there are for you and thinking that maybe it wouldn't be so bad to be sober or to quit or cut back, that actually maybe it could be the beginning of something really beautiful. And that's really cool.
Yes. So good. Right. The reframing that you're doing around this for people, it's like, yeah, think about all the opportunities for what is possible. And I think when you start to think about it that way, it becomes exciting. I'd love to hear from you as somebody who, at this point, it's been over 4 years since 2021 that you've been sober. Congratulations. It's such an amazing accomplishment. What has been the most rewarding thing that you feel you've experienced since your sobriety journey?
Yeah, that's a big question, but an easy one for me to answer, which is it's really made me feel like I'm on the right path. I
Mm.
feel like when I was drinking, I was always searching for something that I couldn't quite figure out. I couldn't quite grasp. I was always looking for or thinking that these things were outside of myself. And
Yeah.
as I mentioned, Jamie, I think what became very clear to me in that first year of quitting drinking was all of these things that I had tried so hard for so long to do, like training for a half marathon. I could never train for a half marathon. I was always going out on the weekends, partying. I was
Mm.
prioritizing the wrong things. And what became really, really clear is that this took away all those barriers. This was the
Mm.
one thing that made everything else easier. And it was the one thing that I look back now, I'm like, what a self sabotaging behavior it can be
Yeah.
because it keeps us small. It keeps us from having the energy, the time, the mental capacity to go and chase these things that we're after. So I think if nothing else, it's really made me feel this alignment and that like everything that I've done had a purpose and a reason. And that's more clear to me now that alcohol is no longer in the picture.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm grateful
clarity
for it
for
because it
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm grateful for it because I wouldn't have this experience if I didn't have the experience of having alcohol use disorder. But I'm not mad about that or sad about that. I'm grateful for it because it brought me to this place where yeah, I know I can help other people and I can help educate on this and that feels really true for me. And so I think
Yeah.
that those beautiful things are waiting for everyone on the other side of alcohol.
What a great perspective to have and to be grateful for that experience. It sounds like it's been a huge learning opportunity for you and also a huge growth vessel, personally and professionally. So I love seeing this work that you're doing. I have no doubt that it's impacting people in such a profound way. I want to make sure I give you a little bit of space to talk about any projects that you're working on or anything that you're, currently excited about in your work. I know we've mentioned the book a few times, but is there anything that you want to bring to our listeners' attention as to, maybe how they can work with you or things that are coming up or that you're currently focused on in your work.
Yeah, so thank you again, Jamie. We do have online programs that can help support you no matter where you are on your journey to being alcohol free or less alcohol. We've got programs that support you with the nutrition tools and more of this education on the way that it influences your health. Those are available at brookscheller.com. We're doing a lot of work now with recovery centers and mental health clinics and really trying to help make nutrition a standard of care. And that's something that's been really exciting as well. And I'm trying to do more content and things myself too. So I'm in the midst of some launches, which I haven't shared publicly yet, but hopefully will be in the coming weeks and as we toe into the new year, because I just think there's so much to say about this topic. And I think it's important that we get it in front of more people. So definitely stay tuned for that and keep an eye out for what's to come.
Awesome. Well, I will include all of the ways to get in touch with you, learn more about your work. We will link the book, your website, all of those things. Brooke, it was my pleasure to have you on the podcast. I know it's so tough for me to sometimes consolidate these conversations. I feel like we can go into detail for hours on very specific things. Like we could probably hone in on the gut for a good 30 minutes. We could probably hone in on the brain or the hormone piece for quite some time. Do you feel like there's anything important that we've left out of this conversation thus far that maybe, would lend itself to what we've discussed so far?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot. I think we tapped into all of the areas that I think are really important. I think the only thing that's missing is, a lot of the work I'm doing now bridges more into the mental health category as a whole. Addiction and substance use disorders fall under that category, but so many of us who have struggled with substances like alcohol have also struggled with depression, anxiety, etc. And all of these factors too play a role. Our blood sugar, our gut, the way that alcohol may have influenced some of these things too. I'll be covering more of that soon too on my upcoming work, but is just another part of the puzzle here too. Something else to unlock on this journey in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great point to emphasize because I think no matter what is going on, I mean, I've talked to people in so many different areas of wellness, and I was so excited to have this conversation with you because I'm like, okay, we're not narrowing it down to cancer or that type of diagnosis, which can feel emotional for me, for sure, having lived it. I like the fact that I can bring on people who are doing amazing work in all areas of wellness. And I think that mental health is something that, one, I struggled with personally. Two, I hear you and what you're saying. It's an important piece and not to be missed or dismissed when you're looking at somebody who is recovering from alcohol use or recovering from any type of substance or any type of hardship in their life. The mental health crisis in this country, I think, is, I don't know, it's heavy. So I think the more we can have these conversations, the more we can share how to impact your mental health in a great way. I love hearing that that's coming down the pipeline for you. So we will all stay tuned for what's to come from Dr. Brooke. But yeah, it's a subject that is not to be taken lightly, and it's something that everybody deserves to find the right ways to support their emotional well-being. I'm glad to hear that you're diving into that topic.
Yeah, it's a big one, but really important for me personally and professionally too. I'm looking forward to doing more on that too.
Awesome. Well, I ask everybody one final question because you are on the Forward Think Tank. I would love to hear what it is that keeps you moving forward in life.
This is such a great question. I'm glad you asked this. Honestly, I think what keeps me moving forward is helping other people and helping other people through difficult experiences and difficult changes in their life, like quitting drinking or making the decision to cut back. Feel so strongly that it is through the hard things that we learn the most, about ourselves, that we find something better on the other side. And I think we really have to see that from other people to believe it's possible for us. And I know that those stories of inspiration have helped me. So I always try my best to be that story of inspiration for someone else too.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that answer. You're a walking, living, breathing example of what it is like to live life on the other side and thrive. And the fact that you've chosen to take that learning experience in your own life and turn it into a way to help others is so powerful. And the work you're doing it's so meaningful. So I appreciate you. I loved this conversation. Thank you so much. I hope this means that we will stay in touch and my algorithm will sync up more with yours. I can't wait to keep an eye on all the things that are coming down the pipeline for you. So thank you so much, Brooke. I appreciate your time.
And same to you, Jamie. Thank you for having me. And I hope your audience took something away with them today. And I hope that this inspired you and someone who's listening.
Absolutely. I know it inspired me for sure. And I have no doubt that it's going to inspire so many others, especially as we look ahead to the holiday season, which I can't believe is right around the corner. It's cold here in New York, New Jersey. So hopefully you have some nicer weather over there in California today.
It's still in the 70s right now, so I have no complaints.
Girl, it was like 34 when I went outside for a walk this morning. I was like, oh no, okay, we're putting the winter parka on. Good for you for making that move. I love that for you. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you, Jamie.
Hyperbaric oxygen chambers, or HBOT, has been one of the most supportive tools in my healing journey. Why? Because cancer cells thrive in low oxygen environments, and the delivery of oxygen via these chambers help to arrest these cells in their tracks. Not only that, but these chambers can also be used for recovery from surgery and general health maintenance. The best part? You can test this machine out from the comfort of your own home. When I started working deep in the metabolic approach, I was often so overwhelmed trying to make sure my ketones were high enough and glucose was low enough to enter the chamber and maximize the impact, and instead found myself more stressed than ever going back and forth to the wellness clinics only to find out I wasn't in that sweet spot to take a dive. After doing some research, I discovered an amazing small business called Affordable Hyperbaric Solutions. They're based in Colorado and they provide exactly that. Hyperbaric chambers for an affordable price to rent in the comfort of your own home. This entire team has been so kind, resourceful, and flexible, getting me a chamber in my home that I can use at my own leisure. They even have rent-to-own options if you love it. I love supporting a small business with a big heart. If you are interested in a chamber, check out the episode show notes to get in touch with the company and be sure to mention my name, Jamie Mazza. I promise they will take great care of you and you will love it. Thanks for tuning in, friends. So happy you're here. Did you enjoy this episode? If so, I would appreciate you taking a moment to please leave a 5-star review. Every review helps visibility with this episode to reach more people, and I am on a mission to help people learn alternate resources to support themselves in their healing journey on their road to health. So please take a moment to leave a review, leave a comment. I read every single one and I respond back. And of course, the most helpful thing you can do is to share this episode. If you found it helpful, if you found it entertaining, please share it on social media, send it to a friend, a loved one, someone you think could find this helpful. It means the absolute world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening, and I will see you soon.